as a
But nice.
guest.
That's crazy. Well, how did you make Braden? How did you get him on?
I don't know. I don't know. I invited him as a host. Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But I know that you have limited time, so I really wanted the students to hear from you today, and to learn a little bit. Oh, it says when you have less than 200 followers, they don't give you a camera.
Oh wow,
What?
that's so
Okay.
funny.
So you
That's
can have a voice, but not a face. So,
wonderful,
okay.
wonderful. I'm not on TikTok
Uh,
enough.
so I just wanted to, for you to introduce yourself. I'll give a brief introduction. Adai is a friend of mine. We went to law school together. We battled in the trenches together. Ever since I met her, social justice issues have been near and dear to her heart. And she has worked in that field since I can remember. She is currently the director at the Louis A. Berry Institute for Civil Rights and Justice at Southern University Law Center. And she spearheads a lot of programs, and she's just been fundamentally involved in this field for so long. And so I just wanted her to be here to talk to you guys about some of these things that are going on in civil rights, to kind of give you an overview of what she does. And I know that you guys want to talk about DEI. I did not include that in my video. I know that that's something that you guys would like to discuss. And so we'll kind of do a little bit of that. Adai will be here until 7:30. So I want to get her going. She has a new little baby, you guys. And so she's doing it all right now. Okay. So welcome, Professor Lampkin, you guys. And I'll give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Lacey. I really appreciate you for doing this, and you're always such an innovator in all ways. So, whereas I in my 40s, I'm just on Instagram. Bless my heart. So be nice to me. But my day job is both being a nurse to this new 3-month-old baby, but also the director of the Institute for Civil Rights and Justice. I have been doing civil rights all throughout my matriculation through law school, but I was also very much involved in college, even in high school. I went to the states only boarding school for gifted students, and I saw a void in being actively engaged, civically engaged in our surrounding community where I was. And so it's always been in me to make sure that I am reaching out and using whatever talents God gave me to uplift the people around me, to be an active member in my community. So currently, I have a federal grant that was just threatened by one of Trump's executive orders, but I work with the state to help them implement reforms that were passed 20 years ago for our juvenile justice system. And so that's our really big focus right now, is making sure that we understand how policies impact our young people. When we talk about public safety, when we talk about being tough on crime, how we're really rolling back and going backwards instead of forwards, and making sure that our policies align with the goals of public safety. Another thing that I do is I teach law school students how to investigate cases of racially motivated homicide from the Jim Crow and civil rights period. That's a huge part of my work. Restorative justice is kind of baked into everything that we do. So whereas we can't get justice in the courts, we get justice in other ways by asking people who have lost a loved one to a lynching or a racial violence otherwise, what does justice look like to you? We find ourselves in a period where history is absolutely repeating itself. That's why the work that we do is so important, because to know is to not repeat. To know is to be educated enough to avoid and to strategize to improve our station in life. but we're absolutely going backwards there. So I don't know if Lacey mentioned that, but we're in the state of Louisiana. We have a governor, Jeff Landry, who has done a lot to our laws that affect civil rights, that affect reproductive rights, that affect education, very much aligned with President Trump. So we have a very difficult job walking a very thin line, a tightrope, to make sure that we can still do quality programming, we can still reach out to community, still educate in the way that we feel is necessary without the threat of losing our jobs and livelihood. And I'll stop there and let
Okay.
Professor Hamilton speak.
So, one thing I want to tell you guys right now, go and follow Adai. Go follow her right now. So that she can also start to build on this platform and share some of the work that she does with you guys, because I really feel like it would be transformative for you guys to really see exactly what it is that she's talking about in application. With the Law Center right now, as these changes have rolled out with the new administration, you mentioned about some things that Jeff Landry, who's obviously, in cahoots with the whole Republican agenda right now. What are you guys concerned about right now? Like, what is your main focus?
Well, I can tell you as a state employee, we're just focused on our job, right? And that's code for I don't want to lose my job. And that's I think
Correct.
really crippling for the work that we do, because we
Yeah.
go out to the community, we create not just voting rights education, but we help with redistricting. We help to advise that process. We've had students who've drawn maps. And so promises made during, elections and campaigning, we now see those things not happening. But because we're state employees, we're really not in the position to say anything without our livelihoods being threatened. So the
Understand.
focus for us is really what can we do? What is within our rights that doesn't overstep with things that are, clearly on his agenda. And so a lot of that is got to be watered down when it's public facing, and the radical work is very quiet. And so public facing, of course, we're focused on voting rights. We're focused on a new law, Act 3, that would allow the state legislature to put any crime on the list of crimes that a young person can be convicted as an adult for. This is something that is very, very dangerous to our system. And we don't have to read the tea leaves, because we see RFPs going out to different jurisdictions, asking them to present proposals so that they can build new juvenile facilities, so that they can build detention facilities. And if you know anything about juvenile justice, if you got a cousin, a brother, somebody that got caught up as a young person in the juvenile system, you know that as a juvenile, if you commit a crime, you do not go to jail. You're supposed to go to a rehabilitative center. You're supposed to have an assessment that sees, what happened in your life that allowed you or that facilitated situation such that you would commit a crime. And they're supposed to provide treatment for that. They're supposed to provide resources for that. So we're rolling back on the way that we think about juvenile justice. And so our focus right now, really, really heavily, is to make sure that we're providing data, we're providing testimonies, we're providing reports, best practices, so that they can make informed policy decisions and hopefully pivot away from a really punitive, archaic way of thinking, because our youth deserve opportunities to be rehabilitated, especially where the state lacks resources like mental health. So that's kind of one of
Right.
our focus areas. The other focus areas are going to be, really quietly, some reproductive justice, and
Mhm.
immigration, and that's very quiet because it's a controversial topic right now.
Right. Right. I want to talk about, if you're able, I'm not sure if you're able to talk about some of the work that you did in New Orleans with the government there, the local government in New Orleans, with the monitor program that you guys put into place there.
So, are you talking about the independent police monitor
Yes.
or something else? So,
Yes, the independent police.
okay, so when I was with the city, I worked in the mayor's office of criminal justice coordination, and my job was kind of racial equity, looking at disparities in our system. New Orleans, I don't know how many are familiar with a consent decree, but when a police department doesn't operate in the way that it should to serve and protect, and they violate people's civil rights, and they have so many use of force violations, then the federal government can come in and do an assessment and see if there are patterns and practices that essentially undermine public safety, undermine people's civil rights. And that's what happened several decades ago. And so a part
Mhm.
of the consent decree that was negotiated with the federal government was for New Orleans to have an independent oversight group. And this is called the Independent Police Monitor. The Independent Police Monitor shows up at sites where there are officer involved shootings, misconduct that's really egregious, and things like that. I didn't do direct work with the Independent Police Monitor, but we worked closely with the Independent Police Monitor by collecting data to understand what was happening in our communities, to make sure that there was mediation being offered. It seems like restorative justice, I don't know if you feel this way, but restorative justice, when it's used, pragmatically within the system, it's used to benefit certain people when the intention was was for it to benefit marginalized people. And so the Independent Police Monitor in New Orleans has done a really good job of making sure that they're representing and protecting the rights of certain people. But it's kind of like the UN. They don't have teeth. You can make some recommendations, you can put out a report, but you can't really get officers fired. You can recommend training, but you can't mandate training. And
Mhm.
so there's a hostile kind of relationship between monitors, the independent police monitor, and city government, because when a federal government comes in and their civil rights have been violated for decades, and the federal government comes in, they charge the city for that monitoring. So for
Mhm.
decades, the city of New Orleans has been paying millions and millions of dollars to federal monitors, for a judge, for folks who work alongside the police department to put out reports about how they are doing when it comes to use of force. Another
Mhm.
thing that I did with the city was I developed strategies to reduce racial and ethnic disparities in our adult jail. That was under a MacArthur grant. And I mean, I wish we could talk forever, because when there is an opportunity, and we have to look towards this more now than ever, because we got to turn away from our systems. Our systems are now being operated by very conservative folks, right? So we're going to
Right.
have to turn to community, to nonprofits. And just like there's a prison industrial complex, there's a nonprofit industrial complex. And so you're
Right.
still under the will and the whims of people who, want to have wins in their column. And so a huge miss for the nonprofits was mandating that we focus on our adult system, when we know that the adult system is fed by the juvenile system. We know
Right.
that young people, 17 to 25, that's the largest group. That's the highest number of people that you're getting. And it's mostly young black men who are populating our jails. in our juvenile systems. So what I did was I worked within the grant, the parameters of the grant, to create strategies so that we could target young people through education, but also provide a lot of outreach, mental health services, and things like that, that really made a difference in the numbers. And we brought our jail population way down, like under 1,000. Jeff Landry comes into office, it's right back up at 1,400. Our jail is maxed out. So we did a lot of good, but so we did a lot of good, but the pendulum always swings. And I'm gonna leave it at that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So within that context of the federally funded programming, do you see that being a challenge for the next 4 years?
Absolutely. There, if anybody is familiar with federal grants, the tone, the kind of grants that are put out for the public, for schools, state agencies, nonprofits, whatever, to get, that is determined by a set of priorities. And those priorities are, developed by the administration, the sitting administration. We just came out of the Biden administration, and so priorities, whether it's very apparent or not, but the priorities were very much in favor of reform, criminal justice reform. Now our grant was threatened. The 10-day review that they were going to have when they froze the funds could have absolutely resulted in us losing funding, because the work that we're doing is considered equity work, right? So federal funding is absolutely
Right.
It's so imperative. People don't realize how much money we get from the federal government to do so many different things. So now we absolutely have to turn to nonprofits. Folks criticize organizations that are doling out money like Soros, but without those kinds of organizations, without the Ford Foundation, without the Mellon Foundation, a lot of programs that you may know tangentially, or somebody in your family has benefited from, because IPNO has gotten a large amount of grants, the Innocence Project at Southern Poverty Law Center, those kinds of organizations, they still need a lot of funding. And when we're so stretched thin, because we're fighting battles, these organizations are fighting battles constantly using that funding, it makes it impossible to get really anything done. And so that's why we see kind of this flooding where it's almost like your neck is breaking, because these policies, these executive orders are coming left and right. It's by design. It's to overwhelm people who are doing the good work, and they have cut off the faucet of federal funding to cripple. And so this is, it's diabolical, it's genius, and it's really going to impact our work. So, we definitely have to turn to community and away from our reliance on federal funding for the next 4 years.
Okay. And so I understand like the idea that we need to really start pouring into to our nonprofits, and I'll get a list of nonprofits from you to post for anybody who wants to donate. But in that same vein, I want to talk about the work that you did with organizing during the Alton Sterling protest, and what that looks like for us now when we're talking about maybe organizing to galvanize the money, move the money, so that we can start to fund some of these projects that are very necessary to our existence at this point.
Okay, great. And I hope people remember Alton Sterling. This was 2016. A lot happened in 2016, right? President Trump, Donald Trump president again, right? Well, first time. And so we had a definite shift in federal priorities. So in Baton Rouge, when you had a police officer who kind of snuffed the life out of a staple in this community of North Baton Rouge. There was a huge swelling up of young people, old people who, had just witnessed so many other acts of racial violence done by police. And a lot of folks don't know, but Baton Rouge, was the epicenter of the civil rights movement. The Montgomery bus boycott was not the first boycott. The first boycott was the Baton Rouge bus boycott. But that kind of community response to racial violence and to discrimination had been quelled by a very oppressive local government. When Alton Sterling was murdered, we saw the exact same thing. You saw people organizing, getting out in the streets, protesting. And I had just graduated from law school, actually, and I was on the board of the National Lawyers Guild for the state. And I was the only one in Baton Rouge. So we had to organize. This is, what movement law is. And movement law is really, really important. It will be important right now because of the administration. Movement law relies on community organizers, regular people, and lawyers who are trained to protect protesters and to help people meet the demands that they have. So as a movement lawyer, I worked with the group of young people that organized the largest protest, where a lot of people came from out of state to attend this protest, and help them define what their demands were, to really focus on what's important instead of just going out on the street and saying we want justice, no peace. Okay, but what else? What else? What else do we want to demand of our government that they can actually give us? And developing a plan with them. In that situation and leading up to that large protest, there were other protests where people were getting routinely arrested and charged with the same violations over and over, obstruction of a roadway, resisting an officer. And the city was getting rich, right? We had to organize a bail fund. And we raised over $370,000 so that we could make sure that we bailed people who wanted to voice their concerns, who wanted to take to the streets. We had to bail them out. We also had to train people. So we trained legal observers so that they could go out when protests were happening and make sure that they were documenting the actions and the behaviors of the police officers, of law enforcement that were there. We trained community members on how to be medics. So there were a lot of injuries. So when we would, take them from the protest site and provide medical treatment, or we would also pick them up from jail, bail them out, provide their legal defense, pick them up from jail, and then provide them medical support. We did a lot of communications because at that time, in these situations, a lot of people are going to be shouting a lot of things. And some people criticize Black Lives Matter movement for not being more organized or not having one voice. But the movement was really to let anyone who wanted to have a voice. The point of movement lawyering is to organize those voices, to organize those demands so that they're coherent. And so we did a lot of communications work, capturing the feeling of the people, the demands of the people, and helping them to formulate that into structured demands. We also had a class action lawsuit against Baton Rouge Police Department, against the Sheriff's Department, against the city. We negotiated a memorandum of understanding so that protesters wouldn't be treated that way. I mean, this is at a time where when we had a protest in one night, there were 200 arrests and about 70 injuries. So we created a very, well-oiled machine in the period of about a week with the help of folks from Ferguson, from New York, from Baltimore, people who were experienced in this kind of work, and the money that poured in from normal people, but also from these nonprofit organizations. So we weren't able to stop people from getting hurt, but when they did get hurt, whether physically or by restraint of movement, we were able to help them recover and recoup it by lawsuit or medically.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why I wanted to highlight that is because I feel like where we are right now, everybody's looking for an answer, right? Everybody's like, well, what do we do? Where do we go? I think the fire that everybody had around that period of time between 2016, when did Elton Sterling? That wasn't in 16. That was in
July 5th, 2016.
it was 2016. Okay, so in between 2016 and 2020, I just feel like we were all focused on one mission, and we were all pulling our resources at that time for that mission, and it was amazing. And that kind of died down thereafter. From a lay person's perspective, right? I mean, you do this work every day, so you still in it. But I want people to have that same fire again, where we are able to pool our resources and to start, getting involved in our community at a grassroots level, because I feel like that's where it's going to start, especially with midterm elections coming up in 2 years. There are a couple seats that can be flipped, in the Senate and in the House. I think now is the time to really like gain momentum into like funding these organizations, being a part of community projects and grassroots projects, finding candidates, that align with your morals, your values, and things the person that you want to see in these seats. I think that's important to start doing now rather than later and waiting. And so that organization element in that period of time, I think it was phenomenal. And I wish that we had a structure for that now, specifically for that goal, because we know that funding is a problem. We know that on a federal level that we're going to experience some drawback of, civil rights protections. I mean, I think, as of right now, they were appointing somebody, over the federal civil rights division. Like this person is not, equipped or does not want to advance our objectives, right? And so we're going to see that throughout this administration. And so it's like, what do we do at this point? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We have to turn to community, and we have to turn to organizing, kind of at the grassroots level. But it's going to be collective power,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't stay in this posture of being reactionary. We're going to have to make some strides, not just in the streets, but we're going to have to make some strides in the courtroom. What you
Mm-hmm.
said initially, in terms of voting about our elected officials, judges are elected officials,
Mm-hmm.
and we are going to lose if we allow our benches to go back to all white benches. There is a case, Clark v. Edwards, specifically for Louisiana. Louisiana produces the most black judges out of any state in the country, and that's because of this case, Clark v. Edwards. Um, that's about to shift,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have appointed judges and you also have elected judges.
Mm-hmm.
The appointed judges, we are losing on that battlefront. We're going to lose on that battlefront. So we got to pray that the judges that are, that believe in freedom and believe in equity, that they
Right.
hold on and that they they keep their post. But in terms of elected judges, that needs to be a priority for us.
Absolutely.
We have to galvanize that vote. I mean, wholeheartedly. And in
Mm-hmm.
Louisiana is beet red, but we're going to have to make sure that we're tapping into our rural communities.
Mm-hmm.
We leave out a lot of important numbers. We miss people when we leave out the rural parishes because they vote. Oh, they vote. And when you have an uninformed electorate, when you got black folks and white folks living side by side in these rural communities, and you don't have organizations that are making sure that there's voter education in those communities, you're missing an opportunity. Constantly miss the opportunity to educate, especially Black and Latino voters in our rural parishes. So we have to change our mindset from being reactionary and start to think, because they, and when I say they, and I hate to do that, but that's just the way I talk, I'm sorry. But when you have a very conservative state government and federal government, you are going to have to kind of think of it as a chess match. And they have done a masterful job in putting together a plan that is going to affect generations.
Yep.
Meanwhile, we're thinking just about the next election. Oh no, we can't do that. We have to think about Supreme Court. We have to think about our federal court. We need to think about our Court of Appeals, because certain elected officials are able to overturn a lot of progress, and they're also able to allow bad things to happen. We just saw an LSU professor who should have been protected by freedom of speech get fired from LSU law.
Yep.
And we had a wonderful judge, Donald Johnson, who ruled that he needed to be brought back into the classroom.
Yep.
Okay, we voted for Donald Johnson, right?
We definitely did. Yep.
But there was also a vote for the judge on the appellate court that overturned Donald Johnson. And that professor is not back in the classroom because of that. So we need to be strategic about the judges that we're putting on the bench. We need to be strategic about the representatives that we're voting for, because we got a lot of lame duck representatives.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
gonna keep it up.
Look, we'll talk about that offline, because I actually do want to. I got some stuff to say about that.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
yeah.
it really is problematic, you know. And they, at a certain point, you know, so certain folks have to understand when it's time to go and to usher in new blood, and we're having a hard time at that, and I think that that's a, you know, that's the issue. I feel like, and this may, you know, not be popular opinion, but I feel like that was the issue with the Supreme Court, and part of the reason why it looks like it looks right now. Because
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
Ruth to the left. You can say Ruth to the left under Obama.
definitely should have,
Yes.
definitely should have, and I think that has put us in place. When you're talking about generations to come, this is what this looks like, you guys. When you're able to appoint the Supreme Court justices, we're talking about, you know, the law of the land and things being overturned. You know, this is serious stuff,
Right.
and they have the right to do that at this point. And so the bench is extremely important. So make sure that you're paying attention to those local elections, you guys, and getting the vote out. You know, can't stress that enough, because that's where these cases, when we file these civil rights actions, or violations rather, that's where they go. They go to the judges. You know, they don't go to your elected officials. They go to the judges, and they are the ones that decide the letter of the law.
And I think something that has been on kind of the civil rights radar for a while is a case called Oberfeld. And if you're familiar with Oberfeld, first of all, if you were following Roe and how Dobbs undid Roe, right? So now there's no abortion that's allowed. You know, there's no federal protection for abortion and states' rights, right? The states get to decide. Well, Oberfeld kind of did the same thing for contraception. People talk about we're going to Handmaid's Tale type of life, and
That's
so
real.
uncanny because it's scary
Hmm.
when you think about someone coming into your bedroom and deciding your rights in your bedroom. And when life starts, now they keep going back further and further. It starts at conception is fertilization, and now they're saying, okay, well, conception is in the sperm. The
Hmm.
moment the sperm leaves the body. What are you saying? And
Exactly.
so if you use contraception, you're essentially aborting life. Child, come on.
Right.
When we have um, Clarence Thomas, I think, is going to retire under Trump.
Hmm.
We have two
Hmm.
judges that are likely going to retire under Trump. And Clarence Thomas said in one of his opinions last year that Oberfeld was next, that we needed to look again at Oberfeld. Um,
Hmm.
be very afraid. Be
Yeah.
very, very afraid, right? But also vote in people that are going to hold the Supreme Court accountable. They can change
Hmm.
Congress. Only Congress can change the composition of the Supreme Court. So we need
Hmm.
to be looking at our congressional elections as well.
Correct.
I went through IVF for my son. I
Hmm.
have uh, five other embryos, six other embryos. Um, those aren't people. I'm not getting tax write offs for them. They may not, work if they get implanted. They may not. Life, it can't be defined in ways that old people on the court decide. It needs to be decided by doctors, right?
Right.
And so doctors can say, no, that's the potential for life. And that way we can treat it differently. Our laws and our policies can align with the way that we're thinking about it
Hmm.
based on the information given by an expert, a doctor.
An expert.
But we're about to, have a situation where two Supreme Court justices leave, and under Trump, two new conservative Supreme Court justices will help to codify this ignorance even further.
Right.
So now we have decades to go before we can even reverse that.
Yep.
This is so now you can't just being strategic. You can't just look at the elections of the president. Now you got to look at Congress, and
Hmm.
also don't just look at this next election. Look down the line. Who are the leaders that are showing promise? Help
Right.
to build them up. We have to be a generation of people that's not afraid to dig in our pockets a little bit and support people that are
Hmm.
doing good work, that believe in community, that believe in progress, that are fighting for people's rights, that are not trying to get away, not trying to tear down the secular state. We are going in the direction of a radicalized Christian nationalism, and we absolutely need to pivot away from that. It requires us to think strategically and act strategically about who we're putting in office. And we definitely need to be focusing on our local election, our judges, and Congress.
Hmm. Hmm. And I was talking to a friend of mine last night. I was talking to Pat. And that was his sentiment. He's like, at this point, we have to look forward. Like, we are more or less concerned with all of the clickbait and the headlines that this administration is putting out, things that we don't know whether or not they're true. And I think that we need to stop and focus on the future and put our efforts there, as opposed to saying, well, why are they doing this? Or, we had these confirmation hearings and they putting this person in and this person believes this, that, and the third. The American people as a whole have decided that this is what they wanted. And it's nothing that we can do to change that part of it, right? So what we need to be doing right now, like Adai said, is being strategic, moving forward and looking down the line and digging in our pockets and supporting local people that we believe that would be excellent to be leaders in our communities. And that's really where it's at right now. And of course, vote. And I think that that's the overarching sentiment that we want to share with you guys today. And this is something that you all should be having conversations with your friends about. You should be having conversations with your family about. How are we going to move the pendulum forward? How are we going to reshape the future for our children and our children's children in this situation that we are in now? Because we're in it, right? And it's nothing that we can do about it now but make plans for the future.
Indeed. Indeed.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, you had some last words. I'm sorry.
Let me close with something.
Yes.
A friend of mine, Chanel Matthews, who has done communications for Black Lives Matter for a number of years. She teaches at a college in New York. She wrote something today that struck me, and I want to leave you with it. And she says, fascism offers a clear, emotionally compelling narrative, a return to law and order, a scapegoat for every crisis, a vision of power and domination. The left, in contrast, often struggles to articulate a bold, unified alternative, falling into reactive, defensive, or utopian messaging that fails to connect with the daily struggles of working class people. We cannot afford to remain on the defense. Too often, we face a false choice between pragmatism and radicalism, between incremental wins and transformative demands. We must reject this binary. Our task is not to water down our vision, but to make it irresistible. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. That was so wonderful. I want to read that entire article. So send that my way. I'll post it for you guys to watch. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
I think you need to just hang up because I don't know how to do it. So
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna just
we'll
click
chat
off.
later.
Best
And you
of
guys
luck.
make sure that you go and follow Professor Lampkin here. And do you have an Instagram? Anything else you want to plug before you go?
I just be working, and I come on social media for fun, but y'all gonna make me come on here. So I'm gonna get with Professor Hamilton to see how I can take to this platform and use it for good.
Yes, because the people want to hear from you, I assure you.
Okay. Well, thank you so
Okay,
much
girl.
for having me. Y'all have a
Okay.
good night.
Good night. All right, you guys, how y'all feeling? I'm gonna get into some comments now. I absolutely wanted you guys to hear from her, and now you understand why. Just a powerhouse. And I hope, like, the goal of that is that I hope that hearing from somebody who actually does that work and that is in the trenches every day doing the things, that you guys are motivated to also get out there and figure out, what can I do right now, right? What can I do to move the needle forward in my community? And it's so much work to be done. And we have to stop, just like that amazing quote at the end, y'all. I cannot wait to get my hands on the article that she wrote, because just that one quote was, I mean, it said so much about how we are and what we are doing right now to our detriment. And we have to start thinking ahead and being strategic and not being reactive and being on the defense all the time. One of the things, when I started in personal injury, and I have a video posted where I just kind of told y'all about, my the different fields that I have been in as an attorney. I was on the reactive. I was always on the defense. I was always trying to figure out how to respond to something that the other side was doing. So I didn't have the time to be strategic and to think about how I wanted this case to play out all the way to the end, because I was always answering stuff and doing stuff and running behind stuff that the other side, they just moving. They just doing things. right? So my goal was to be proactive. I want the case to move how I want it to move, right? So in order to do that, I have to work my case from the end to where I am right now. So I know every step in between. And that's the same thing that we have to do right now. We have to look at the end goal, right? Of where we want our kids to be. And then we got to work backwards from there so that everything that we do is strategic. Every move that we make is purposeful. So, we can all sit on here and moan and complain about the current administration and the election and what happened and who didn't do what and this, that, and the third. And I think that there's something to be said about that. But that's not going to change our current situation. And our ancestors fought for us to have the rights and the freedoms that we have now, and they did not get to enjoy them. Think of the character and the motivation that you have to just do what's right. Just fight for what's right. You're sacrificing everything to just do the right thing so that we now have the opportunity to do the things that we're doing. And now those same freedoms that we have are being threatened. So what are we going to do about it? We going to let them get taken away. We going to lay down and just let them take it? Because there will be struggles for us for some time moving forward. Because again, we have things that are being things that we have laws that are being repelled or rejected that took a long time to get there. These are, landmark civil rights cases that are being overturned. They're being overturned, you guys, for basic human rights. When did you ever think that a woman's body in this day and age was a topic of discussion for a lawmaker and not her physician? It's almost like living in, what is that show, The Twilight Zone. Like, we hearing from everybody but a doctor. Everybody has an opinion on how this should work, but a physician. So I think that the answer is for us in order for us to move this forward, we have to get active. We have to start grooming people in our communities, raising them up to leadership positions. Go to your council meetings. See, peep out who's in there that's doing the good work. Look within your community organizations. Who are some people that have been doing this work and that are going to do what they say that they are going to do? They stand for something, and support those people. You know? So I'm just looking at our questions. I'm gonna try to answer a few before we get off our live. So are our civil rights protected? So we gained civil rights through several different amendments. Obviously, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I haven't seen that come across yet. I don't know if they'll go that far, but I don't put anything past anybody. What else? Voting Rights Act of 1965. I haven't seen any of that. Also, the 14th Amendment, you guys, it's complicated. And we'll dive into this a little bit more during constitutional law. But the 14th Amendment did two things. It made citizenship legal for African Americans, and it also made equal protection of the laws available for African Americans or for all people. Okay. Um, but that has always been a struggle, for us to get equal protection under the law. I don't think that's going to be a bridge, but what I'm trying to say is that there have always been struggles with our civil rights, regardless of the letter of the law. And I think that what we're going to see with DEI, that concerns me. That concerns me. I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what DEI is, or maybe not. Maybe the understanding is not meant to be had. For the conservatives, that could very well be the case. But it's it's not a. I guess when you think about DEI as a framework for organizations, because that's what it is. DEI is a framework for organizations to have a diverse workforce, to have equity in their workforce and inclusion, right? And so it encompasses more than just African Americans, but obviously this is where we're going to see this play out much more than anyone else. And it's because African Americans have always been a target, right? And so when we talk about equity and equality, those are two different principles. And there was a drawing, or like I think it was like a cartoon, you guys, that I saw that explained the difference between equality and equity, right? And so equality is that all the people were standing on a stool that was the same height, right? That's equality. Okay. We're going to bring everybody up to the same height, regardless of your background, regardless of your disadvantages in life, whatever the situation is, we're just going to make you equal. So just imagine that we are coming from a race that has been disenfranchised, systematically oppressed, institutionalized, and marginalized since we got on this continent. So you mean to tell me you're going to give me the exact same thing as somebody else to make us, you're going to give us equal things, right? And so that is why it doesn't work, right? In application, that is the reason why it doesn't work. And so equity basically means is that I'm going to bring, let's just say, there's another race that's here because they have owned property, they have done all the things since the very beginning of time. I'm going to bring you up to here. Despite all the disadvantages that you've had, I'm gonna make you at the same level as them. That's why it's a problem. They believe in equal treatment, not equity. And so DEI programs, there is no quota where they have to hire so many Black people. You may have to interview so many, people of different backgrounds, but you still have to be qualified to get the job. You cannot get the job without the appropriate qualifications. They're not hiring less skilled people just because they are adhering to a DEI framework. A DEI framework just allows you to get the interview. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't guarantee you the job when you're not qualified. It gets your foot in the door. So just imagine those programs being rolled back where you don't even get the interview, regardless of the fact that you qualified just because of the color of your skin. And I think the implications of that is going to be far reaching. And that's my concern right now. Because again, we are overqualified. We are overeducated most of the time. But if we can't even get our foot in the door, that's problematic. That's problematic. But when you're competent, you're not concerned. In the words of my good sister, Jasmine Crockett, or as I like to call her, Jasmine Clockett. When you're competent, you're not concerned. But because they aren't competent, they are worried about us coming in and being and having the qualifications for those jobs. And that's the problem. Hey, there are a variety of acronyms for DEI that include various other terms. I had a list of them, but you guys understand what I mean. We're not going to get into the schematics and semantics, and I think that is something that we just really need to stop doing. You know, y'all know exactly what we're talking about. Just like you guys know why you see all of these headlines with this egregious stuff that Trump is doing or is going to do, is to upset you, get you riled up, and get you off focus. And so I'm going to leave y'all with this. It's time to get focused. It's time to refocus. Okay? It's February. We done been in this thing for a few days. We see how it's going down. A lot of that stuff, I don't think it's going to ride. It will play out, but I don't think it's going to ride. You know, but the point is to get us off focus. And we need to get back focused like we were when we were fighting for criminal justice reform. Because at that time, we were ready to hit the streets, as we should have been. But we should also have that same motivation today to organize in our communities, to start grassroots projects and organizations so that we can start to get ourselves together and structured for the future. And yes, that starts with conversations like this. That starts with you speaking to people like Professor Lampkin, who is doing this work, and what her vantage point is. Like, what is she experiencing right now? What is she concerned about? What should we be concerned about from that perspective? And that's going to help us. You know, I think Hillman Talk came around at a great time. I think I'm being shadow banned, you guys. There's no surprise there. And I think a lot of other folks that are professors on Hillman Talk, I spoke with one today, and she mentioned the same thing, that her videos weren't getting around and things like that. But we're going to keep doing this. We are going to keep doing this. We are not going to stop, because our life depends on it, and our children's lives and their children's lives depend on us, just like we depended on the people, our grandparents and great grandparents in 1965 and 1964. to do what they did for us to have these civil rights. But I posted a video today, and I truly believe the promise and the power that are in Black people. Our race is so dynamic, and we are the dominant race. We have so many skill sets. Someone posted on their video that we have been making something out of nothing and excelling at it from the very beginning. And we have. So imagine imagine if we actually had the opportunities, where we would be, how far we could go. If we actually had equity in everything, that would be amazing to see. I hope I could see it in my lifetime. But we got to dig our heels down, and we got to get busy. All right? So what's next week, y'all? I don't know. I was so excited about this week. I don't remember what we have for next week. Cause now I'm motivated, and whatever I decide to do, to work on these efforts, I will let y'all know. But I feel like it starts here. I'm doing it right now, honestly. I feel like it starts here. It starts with education, understanding where you are, where you've been, so that you know where we gotta go. Contracts. Thank y'all. Contracts. Okay. I was just thinking that, Raw. Contracts, but can we move constitutional law up? I think we are. Because it goes hand in hand with civil rights, obviously. But at that point, we get to talk about, the Supreme Court, the powers that, that are given to the president, the legislative, the executive, the judiciary. There are certain powers that are given by law. And y'all need to understand that. So when you start hearing some of this crazy stuff on TV and you realize, you can't do that. You can't do that without, the vote of Congress. You can't do some of this stuff, it's just not going to fly. But to people, who's not in it and don't necessarily understand, how constitutional law works, and I think that's what the point is. Trump is very good at speaking to the ignorant and the uneducated. He has done an excellent job at that. So we got to do an even better job at educating ourselves and our sisters and brothers and mamas and daddies. So I think I'm going to move con law up. I'll make an announcement about it so that everybody who didn't make this live can see. If there is anyone that wasn't able to attend the live tonight, it will be posted on my YouTube page. You can click the link and subscribe to my YouTube page, and you'll be able to watch it there. If you did not see the whole thing, some of you guys came late, but you came. So we go take it tonight because this was a very important one. Go watch the live so that you can hear Professor Lampkin speak and talk about her work and things that we need to be focused on right now. Okay, so y'all have a good night. It is my birthday weekend. My birthday is February 8th. So I may not be posting anything related to class, But I'll be around early next week. It'll probably just be my birthday reel, little outfit here or there. I have a 80s themed skate party planned on Saturday. I'm so excited about it. We are going to have a time as an 80s baby. Everybody dressing up like they are from the 80s. So it's gonna be fun. I'm excited. I've been wanting to do this for a few years now, but I was like, I don't know if I'll have the participation. But everybody jumped on board, and it's gonna be a time. So y'all have a good night. Um, Go watch while y'all laying in bed tonight. Put Netflix on, and put 13th on. I'm gonna watch it again tonight too. I just because I was talking about it today. I'm gonna watch it again tonight. So y'all go watch that tonight, and let's get motivated. See y'all later.